How many of you know what Mosaic Art Now is? Please raise your hand. Oh, goody. Okay, good. So then I'm not an unknown quantity. How many of you get my weekly newsletter? Yes. All right. Okay, so we're off to a good start. So as most of you know, Mosaic Art Now started as the brainchild of the late, great Bill Buckingham. Hello, Bunny Man. Whom I call my gay husband. I have a heterosexual husband, and I had a gay husband, and that was Bill Buckingham. And he asked me to work with him on this publication, and thus Man was born. And eventually, I said to him, okay, we have to go on the internet, because the magazine only comes out once a year, and I started a blog. Well, that blog has now blossomed into a bunch of different things. So what I thought I would talk about today is, okay, I'll tell you the story. I wasn't going to tell you the story, but I'll tell you the story anyway. It's, you know, following Carrie is like, how the hell do you follow an act like that? It's like, can I do my shadow puppets? Maybe that'll work. No. Okay, so when last year, Ravenna Mosaico, are you familiar with this event, the Biennale that happens in Ravenna every other year that celebrates contemporary mosaics in the cradle of modern mosaics or Byzantine mosaics? And the whole town turns into this contemporary mosaic land. It's like Disneyland for all of us. And the opening night, there are exhibits everywhere, and the opening night is called Notte d'Oro. And the streets fill with people. And I mean, it's like bumper to bumper people. And all this, 120 different storefronts have mosaic exhibits in them, and whole churches have been turned into mosaic exhibits. And last year I was there. Lillian was there with me. And after Notte d'Oro, and bumping into people that I'd corresponded with for years, and seeing the thinking about mosaics that was going on, the innovation that was happening, not just for innovation's sake, not just to do something that hadn't been done before, but some things with real thought behind them, fascinating stuff, and people talking, and the conversations. Well, I was inspired. And when I came home, I redid the blog into what is now the website, because this is what I believe. I think that modern mosaics are now at a maturation point where there is a critical mass of fabulous, intelligent, important work being done. At the same time, there's a lot of fabulous, intelligent thought going on about the art form. And that's what Mosaic Art Now is all about, collecting that and presenting that in an engaging way that will inspire our community to do better and more and better. I'll use the word again. And also, I wanted to create a place where there was a repository of the very best we have to offer as a medium to the rest of the art world. And so I have two audiences, and I have three criteria for what I put on the website. And the first, I always ask myself three questions. One, what would the curator of the Museum of Art, of Modern Art and Design in New York think about this story? Number two, what would the arts editor for the New York Times think about this story? And number three, what would the editor for American Craft think about this story? So everything that goes up on my website, and thus everything that you see when you come to visit it or you get in the newsletter every week, has been filtered through those screens. And so, are you liking it? I'm asking you now. Is it working for you? Okay, good. So now on to stories. These are four of my favorite things, and no, I'm not going to do my Julie Andrews imitation and sing for you. I did think of that. I was in a yoga class, and you know, they have that Savant thing they make you do at the very end. I'm not even going to say that, all right, where you're supposed to get into your deep and relaxed. What am I going to do at BAMM? I know, I'll sing like Julie Andrews. And then I thought, no, probably not. So, all right, so we're going to go around the world a little bit here, and I'm going to start in Ravenna, and in fact, an installation that was done in conjunction with Ravenna Mosaico 2011. As you know, Ravenna is a World Heritage, UNESCO World Heritage Site, and there are 6 specific buildings that have that designation. One of those buildings is something called the Aryan Baptistry. Anybody been here? Yeah, fabulous, isn't it? Was anybody else sort of shocked when they got to Ravenna about how the outsides of all these splendid buildings look like a hop kiln or something like that? So inside the Aryan Baptistry is this absolutely splendid mosaic, and the imagery here, the Aryans had a different view of who Christ was. They saw him as a very human person. He was not part of the God triumvirate of the Catholics, what eventually became Catholicism. So in this image, what we see here is Christ being baptized by John, and the character on the other side he's the River Jordan personified and as a human being. So here we have Christ, and he looks like a bit of a schlub. He's just an average Joe. He's got a little wicker bill underneath the waterline. And a group called CACO3, anybody familiar with their work? They graced the cover of the magazine. Absolutely brilliant, a triumvirate of young people, whom we'll meet in a moment. This was the only UNESCO site that was an installation for Ravenna Mosaico 2011. So this is a very big deal. And there are 3 young people, Giuseppe Donalao, Anicum Ferreira da Silva, I'm so butchering these, and Pavlos Mavromatidis, make up CACO3. They wanted to create what they called a simple narrative connection that would amplify the intention of the space, which is a baptistry, and emphasize the idea of a more human Jesus. Now that was their proposition to the committee. They thought about it a great deal, and what they determined would accomplish those 2 things was a towel. Christ emerging, anyone emerging from being baptized, cold, wet, human being. So they created a towel. Using their signature methodology, which is to create very long, thin tessera of marble and put them on end. And here you see the warp and weft of the tile, hanging over an aluminum towel bar. And here they are. Now, I have to tell you, and I'm still getting shivers, when you walked into this building, and the only thing in there was you and that mosaic and that towel, I wept. So why is this an important mosaic, and why am I passionate about this? First of all, the thought that went into it. What could have been more perfect? What would any of us have done, given this opportunity and this site? The simplicity of it, the humanity of it, and the beauty of it together was sublime. Now I'm going to move on to my next site. We're going to take a trip now to the Netherlands. Totally different situation. I'm going to introduce you to a man named Jurin, whose last name I can't pronounce at all. But what makes him special is that he is a storyteller. And he chooses to tell his stories in mosaic, but he's heavily influenced by the Dutch masters of old, who used both projection and symbolism to accomplish their goals. This piece, his muse is his partner. Her name is Buba, and Buba is a recent immigrant from Serbia to Holland. And he's, in the 2 pieces that I'm going to show you, he's telling the story of her planning and then her arrival in Holland. Here we see Buba. This originally was a photograph he took of her, and this is from 2007. She's standing in the garden of her parents' home, preparing to leave. She's finally got her papers. She finally has, it was a very large struggle just to get all of the legal things taken care of so that she could go to Holland. And she's standing in her parents' home in front of the brick wall in her china slippers, the towel, her hair is wet and in a towel. And here's the mosaic. And the symbolism here, if you see the dog, oh, and this is, he also uses the photographic process, the same one that you do, where he prints on tiles using photographs. So the dog's name is Lucky, and Lucky is biting through the chains of all of the problems of emigrating. It's freeing her. She sees her future through the bars, and there's a jigsaw puzzle of butterflies. The butterflies are the hope of the future and also symbols of transformation and change. And the butterflies have bodies of bullets. And this is because she saw her hometown of Novi Sad bombed by NATO in times of the Troubles, and she was emigrating to a very strong NATO partner. The second mosaic that I'm going to show you is, this is one I love, a cup of coffee, a cookie, and a hug. Now, in the 1970s, and this is what Uren says, in the 1970s, Holland had the reputation of being a very liberal and open country that welcomed immigrants. Today, it is probably one of the most xenophobic countries in Europe, and the multicultural experiment of the 70s is considered a failure. Now, all immigrants must adapt very quickly and participate in the Inburgeringsprogramma, or citizen program, which requires, among other things, that they learn the Dutch language. So in this mosaic, what we see is Buba being transformed into a babushka. And the background here being that when Uren was doing another piece, he was doing a sculpture, he asked Buba to be a model for a head form that he was making. So she was lying down with all this plastic around her head, and it reminded him of the babushka dolls that his mother had picked up in Russia, and took him to the imagery of the babushkas invading Holland. So here they are, toddling in, much to the dismay of the natives, with fields in the background, not of tulips, but of windmills, new windmills. Not the old windmills that you see in all of the kitsch around Holland, but the new windmills. And the cows are actually, they're he took imagery from his favorite candy bar as a child. So why is this important? It's important because a lot of mosaic, the basic aesthetic of mosaic these days, the predominant one rather, is abstract. And it's gorgeous and it's wonderful. Very few people are telling stories. And I think he does it beautifully and with meaning. And he's captured a whole zeitgeist here for a country in these two mosaics. What do you think? Yeah, pretty amazing, huh? Okay, so if storytelling is important and his use of symbolism and the selection of the perspective in order to cram in everything that he possibly can, the question from his work is, who are these people? Just looking at these images, it's imploring you to find out who they are and what their stories are. I'd like to see more of this in mosaic. I'm going to move to Egypt now. Land of turmoil. And we're going to look at 3 different mosaic efforts that have been going on in the last year. The first is, well, that I've learned about in the last year. The first is a gentleman by the name of Mohammed Banawi. Mohammed is an instructor at the Helwan University in Cairo. He works mostly in clay. He creates aerial landscapes. And for him, the large portions represent the posh areas where the rich people live, and the smaller tessera, which he creates himself out of clay, is the clusters of the multitudes that are starting to encroach upon the barriers of the rich. This is even more evident in the second work, which is one of his cities. He says his work is in clay, clay being one of the basic elements of creation. The clay is the secret of life and its eternity. From mud, not only is mankind created, but everything else as well. When I am forming units of mosaic mud, I feel warmth, and as if I am a part and parcel of this great universe. These units are the great Egyptian heritage. This piece is also by Muhammad. It's a little bit different. It's called Tahrir Square. And here he is showing, this is specifically about the 25th of January in 2011, which everyone says is the eve of the Arab Spring. And at the center of it, you see people gathering. This is the beginnings of a revolution. And the spiraling out was the actual physical spiraling out of the people and taking the message that it would be possible to make change and to create a new country for themselves. Fabulous, yes? I've also been in correspondence with a woman named Mona Magdi Kenui, who was one of the exhibition and print artists for this edition of Mosaic Art Now. Everything I've seen of hers before has been stone and a little bit of shell. And all of a sudden, she sent me photos of 10 new mosaics from an exhibit that she was doing, and it was clay. And she sent it along with an email, and I'm going to quote from her, and I don't think she'll mind. She sends these photos, and then she says, I just keep myself busy working on my beloved mosaics, trying to live in the realm of art, to keep myself away from what is going on outside. So here you have an Egyptian artist who's taking having a very different personal experience than what Muhammad was having. Muhammad was dealing in terms of possibilities, and for her, it was more than she could really bear. So she went into her studio and she began to work in clay. And here's what she says. Egypt is that land from which civilization was born, and clay was the building block. So I get this, and I've got Muhammad's. This kind of thing gives me shivers to see two people working in two different cities. One, she's in Alexandria, he's in Cairo, and they're going back to clay to deal with what's going on in the world around them. Clay being the very structural DNA of Egypt. At the same time, this is going on, you have students who are going to school to become mosaic artists. And this is the graduating class of 2012's senior project under Sabri Mabri. If you look, can you see this space really well? Can you see what's around the mosaic? It's all graffiti. What they did for their senior project for 2012 was to create mosaic panels that actually covered the graffiti outside their school that was in relation to the revolution. So what one of the students said was, we are proud and happy about what has happened in our country, but beauty is important. And the final favorite thing that I'm going to show you is from Chile. And Carrie's very familiar with this work. And I get kind of conflict about this stuff. You have to understand, I'm totally in love with you guys. It's why I do what I do. In Chile, outside of Santiago, there is a suburb called Puente Alto. And it's not a very happy place. Apparently there's a lot of crime, there's a lot of drugs. It's a city with a lot of tension in it. And about 4 years ago, a young woman who had graduated from university with an art degree was asked by the mayor, and I don't know quite the details about how they got together, but she did a very small public mosaic project, mosaicing the outside of what I believe was a health clinic. And it was a huge success. And the mayor said, "Oh, you're wonderful, you're everything, I've got something else for you to do." And this time, it was a little bit bigger. They have a transit system like you do, only instead of being underground, it's all above ground. And so it's constructed of concrete. And he said, "We've got this really ugly station in the middle of town. Would you make it beautiful with mosaic?" And she said, "Sure." So she completed that. Pictures to come. So he said, "That's great. I'm glad you did that. I've got some more things for you to do." We'll do this now. This is one side of the first station. I'm sorry, I misspoke. This is the Andes at sunrise. And the other side is sunset. This was step 2. Well, there are all these cement columns that hold the tracks up. Can you do something with those? And the woman said, "Sure, I could do something with those." She decided that the thing to do would be to turn it into an outdoor natural museum, glorifying the flora and fauna of the area. There are not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4 columns, but 84 columns. So this step began when the mayor said, "Well, great. My term is about up, and I really want this to be complete. There's a station on the other end. Do you think you could do that too?" And she said, "Sure." So now the project is 3,000 square meters of mosaic. She is running a crew of 59 artists and crew members who do some of the other functions. And this is Isadora Paz Lopez, who is my heroine. This woman, she's 37 years old. She's got a 12-year-old kid. She looks like she could be a model. And she has totally created this all by herself. None of these people has any training in mosaics, including Isadora. They have all learned as they have gone along. It is a 3-step process. A design is determined, and it is sketched by an artist. And then one artist is responsible for the central figure, call it an emblema, the central figure for each column. They create that. There's a second set of people that do the background and a third set of people who do all of the grouting and the scaffolding. So it works just like the Romans did. But all of this was created as she went along. Oh, I forgot to mention, there was a deadline. All of this had to be completed in 365 days. And the deadline is October 31st. So we don't know. We're on pins and needles. But these are just some. I could show you these images for an hour. They are extraordinary. Now, what makes this work? What is important about this? There's a lot of public mosaics out there. But Isadora Paz Lopez has a sense of thoughtfulness and rigor around what she's doing. Each one of these columns, she has one color palette. Each column has green at the bottom, dark blue in the middle, and light blue at the top. The figures, you'll notice, all take about the same percentage of space in a column. They have created what she calls language, and that is there are specific shapes that are used over and over again, this being the lozenge shape. Isn't it just amazing? Isn't it just glorious? She's on Facebook if you want to see more of these. Isadora Paz Lopez, Facebook, ask to be her friend. There are hundreds of photographs. So, why are these my favorite things? First of all, because they are enormously thoughtful. Each one of these artists, every one of these projects, somebody spent a lot of time thinking before they, as I have been known to say, stuck shit to shit. And Severini thinks the same thing. You need to think about what you're doing before you start applying your tessera to your substrate. So first and foremost, that's why I think they're important. The second reason why I think they're important is that they are artistically sound. You could take any of these images, any of this work, anywhere, and the medium would not make a damn bit of difference. It would be fabulous art. And if I leave you with anything today, it is that. Make art, not mosaics. That is the key to breaking through whatever ceiling we think we have between mosaics and the rest of the art world. Screw the Tate. You don't need them. If you do the right work, they will need you. And part of my work is to not just present this information and all these wonderful artists to people like you. I then go to other arts blogs and say, look, I've got this great story about this great artist. I think it would work on your blog because such and such. Or I think you should put this on your website, and I'm beginning to crack a little bit here and a little bit there. Every little bit helps. I'm a promoter. I met a woman yesterday here, and she said, oh, so you make mosaics? I said, no, I don't make them. I promote them. So I have talked with curators about doing exhibitions. And the first curator that I talked with at the Crocker and at Sacramento, whom John's met, I said, I want a breakthrough moment for mosaics. I want a mosaic show. And he said, that's great, but who would come? And other than us, he has a good point. So I guess I love you all. And for me, success for you is that you are selling things and that the things that you make are going the places that you want them to go to, and more people are seeing it. I can't do that for you unless you are doing the work. And that means the discipline that Isadora has here around what she's doing. It means the rigor, and it means what Severini said about joining what you want to make with what you're making it with. There's a phrase that a friend in Ravenna uses, and it's called self-ghettoization. She says the self-ghettoization of mosaics is the biggest thing that we have to overcome. And it's all well and good for us to have our exhibits and for us to look at each other's works. But the more you integrate yourself with the rest of the art world, the faster you are going to be part of it, which is why I don't just show mosaics. I tweet about exhibits. I tweet about what textile artists are doing and sculptors are doing and polychrome people are doing. Everything, it's just art. So I love you all. Go forth and make, and thank you for this opportunity.